Welcome to the channel Learn with Danish. Subscribe and hit the bell icon.
Hello all, have a nice day. In this video, we are going to discuss the topic, the theatre of the absurd. When we look at the start of the 20th century, to be precise, the first half of the 20th century, we can come across three events that shook the entire world. Can you guess what those three events were? Let us take a look. The first event was the sinking of the ship Titanic. Hope you all know about the ship Titanic. It sank in 1912. In April 1912. Why it shook the world? Because it was talk of the time that it was an unsinkable ship and things like that. And unfortunately, in the first voyage itself, the ship happened to sink. So what happened there in those times was the science and technology faced a blow by that incident. But we don't need to concentrate on that event alone. The other incident that shook the entire world was the World War that took place 2 years after the Titanic sank. It happened in 1914. You all might have studied in histories the background of what was the reason behind the First World War. But it is believed by all of us that the First World War was fought to end all the war. But what happened was, unfortunately, it resulted in the Second World War. With the emergence of the Nazi Germany under the leadership of Hitler, we come across the third incident that shook the entire world. It is none other than this Second World War, which began in 1939. This war was considered the bloodiest of the both wars. Do you know why? Because it is this war that in this war it was the deadliest weapon and warfare was used, the atom bomb, which destroyed the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So these two world wars created a huge havoc among the great public during those times. And as a result of this, it also started reflecting on various writings in literature during those times. Before getting into the details of the absurd theatre, let me just brief on the literature of the 20th century as such. The 20th century is often referred to as the modern and postmodern era in literature. Do you know why it is termed so? It is during this time that all kinds of experimental literature emerged. Experimental literature. Now you must be thinking, what do you mean by experimental literature? For example, during the earlier times, the stories and novels had a proper beginning, middle, and an end. But the modern writers started experimenting in style and structure. They started to deviate from the traditional way of writing. They tried to break away from the traditional way of writing. Now, why did they do that? What must be the reason behind this deviation from the traditional way of writing? Here is the importance of the incidents which I have mentioned just now. The two world wars have shattered the whole world. The whole thing was fragmented. Their belief in science and technology was shattered. The life on earth itself was assumingly meaningless. Hence, as a result of these incidents, fragmented literatures started to emerge. Or you can also say experimental literature was also started to evolve. It was quite vividly seen in drama during or after the Second World War. And one such experimental theatre is what is known as the theatre of the absurd. Now let us have a look at the word absurd. What is absurd? The word absurd literally means out of harmony. Out of harmony, out of peace, out of order. The two world wars has created a sense of departing from the logic of life. The whole thing seems to be devastating. World seems to be meaningless. Especially the Second World War triggered huge loss of life. Deadly weapons were used, and the people during those times were living a very sadistic sort of life, and they were very happy, very sad, and devastated. Now, absurd literature, it is a European form of art seen among French writers like Eugene Ionesco, Jean Genet, and Jean Anouilh, etc. Actually, this absurd literature is rooted in the existential philosophy of Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus. Now, Danish will introduce the topic existentialism to you.
Okay, so existentialism is a philosophy that deals with the word itself. You can see the word itself. It deals with the existence of human being in the world. So when we look in a very broad perspective, we can say that existentialism can be divided in a broader perspective in two divisions. One is Christian existentialism and the other one is Sartrean existentialism. Now, before we go further, we are focusing on the European mode of existentialistic philosophy. That is why we are talking about Christian existentialism. Now, and it is the Sartrean existentialism that we have to focus more on, because the absurd dramatists took this philosophy into their place. So let us see what Christian existentialism, or what is the Western existentialism in general, is all about. Like all other Semitic religion, we see that there is a set of rule that is assigned for an individual to live his life in this world. That is, in when you talk about Christianity, there is a set of rule that is prescribed in the holy book or scriptures, where we lay out the norms, the rules of an individual, how he or she should live in a society. That is, when we look into that particular way of existence, that is what is known as Christian existentialism. The existentialism of an individual based on Christian laws or principle. Now, what is Sartrean existentialism? The photo that you see in your screen here is Jean-Paul Sartre. He is the French philosopher. He is the husband of Simone de Beauvoir, the famous feminist thinker who actually wrote The Second Sex. So what is Sartrean existentialism? He actually comes up with a philosophy of existence which is quite different compared to Christian existentialistic philosophy. He says that when an individual has all its freedom in choosing whatever is good or bad in society, or individual have got the freedom to choose his way of life in the society. It says that we live in a world and exist according to our wishes and desire. There is no set principles in the way of existence of life. What we feel good is good for us. What we feel bad is bad for us. That is what is known as Sartrean existentialism, or Paul Sartre's existentialistic philosophy. And it is this particular philosophy that the absurd dramatists of the European context actually focus on, especially the French playwrights, which was a great influence on English dramatists too. The other philosopher that we talked of was Albert Camus. Albert Camus, in his major work, The Myth of Sisyphus, which was written in 1942, which is actually the Western equivalent of the Eastern myth, Naranatha Brandhan, that we all know, where a person actually carries a boulder from down to a hill, uphill, and he throws it downhill. So it actually resembles the essence of absurdity. That is the myth of Sisyphus, actually, the myth of Naranath Brandhan. Now, what does Albert Camus say in his work, The Myth of Sisyphus? Now, I shall pass on the mic to Archa. She would continue.
So let us have a look at what Albert Camus says about absurdity in The Myth of Sisyphus. He says that in a universe that is suddenly divested of illusion and lights, man feels as an alien, a stranger. His exile is without remedy, and since he is deprived of the memory of a lost home, of the hope of a promised land. This divorce between man and his life, the actor and his setting, is probably the feeling of what is known as absurdity. So there is a divorce between the actor and the setting. There is no connection between the logic and reasoning. So that itself is the essence of the absurd theatre. Now let us look at how English absurd drama worked. English dramatists had a profound influence of French writers of the 50s. It was shaped by the comic perception of Ionesco, the use of ritual by Genet, and the visual use of stage by Samuel Beckett. Both philosophy and technique go hand in hand. Moving on. In this slide, you can find general features of theatre of the absurd. That the philosophy and the act in the play suggest meaninglessness, irrationality, deprived of illusion and light. You can find Sartrean existential philosophy. It is usually cyclical in nature, returning to the beginning of the play. And you can also find fragmented dialogues, and the dialogues were also illogical, which gave an idea of postmodern perspective. There is a total lack of exposition and it will be filled with symbols. No direct meaning will be conveyed. In an absurd drama, nothing is directly conveyed to the audience directly. There will be an inner meaning which has to be imparted. At this point I would like to suggest to see the play Waiting for Godot, so that you can connect these features. You can clearly see all these features in that play. So in the next slide you can see one or two important dramatists and their works. The first one, Eugene Ionesco, the bard soprano, written in 1948. The Lesson, written in 1950. Another dramatist, Samuel Beckett, who wrote Waiting for Godot in 1949. Endgame, written in 1957. Happy Days, written in 1961. And Breath, written in 1969. And the third important, one of the important dramatists is Harold Pinter, who wrote The Birthday Party in 1957, The Dumb Waiter 1957, and The Room and that play is also written in 1957. Now, Danish would be elaborating on the dramatist Samuel Beckett.
The writer Samuel Beckett, he is a French playwright. That is the first thing that you would like to note here. He's a French playwright. He's not an English playwright. The picture that you see on the screen is Samuel Beckett. And he's famous for his play Waiting for Godot. Waiting for Godot was written in French in 1949, and it was titled as En attendant Godot, and it was composed in 1948, but it was premiered in 1953. There is a lot of controversy related to the premiering of Waiting for Godot. It is subtitled as a tragic comedy. It has got 2 acts in it. Now, what happens in these 2 acts? It talks about 2 trams. and the trams' names are Vladimir and Estragon. Vladimir is shortened as Didi, and Estragon is shortened as Gogo. And these 2 characters wait for someone called Godot throughout this play. And this Godot doesn't appear anywhere in the play. So these 2 trams are waiting for Godot, and during this waiting process, they actually come across lots of actions. For example, singing songs, playing with the boots, playing with the tree. That is, they hang themselves in the tree, but they don't see who Godot is in that particular play. Both characters engage in their own way of killing time, which is suggestive of the meaninglessness of life. This play is actually deconstructed in many perspectives during the postmodern times. You can deconstruct this particular play to great extent to different forms of meanings as such. There is no one single meaning to this particular play. And Samuel Beckett is also credited with the shortest play in world. That is, he has written Breath. Right, Breath is the shortest play that is ever written. It is just a 35-second play. But in that play, it resembles what life is all about. That is, you have, when the curtain rises, you have a small baby crying. Then there is a deep exhaling and inhaling of breath. Then again a baby cries, and you have the scene ending, which actually resembles the entire life process of an individual. So that is the essence of absurdity. So absurd theater involves theater activity without characters also. Here in that particular play, Breath, which is of 35-second duration, there is no character. And in Waiting for Godot, we have only 4 or 5 characters as such. Main 2 characters plus 2 plus 1 extra characters in Waiting for Godot. So the peculiarity of Beckett is that he has written his plays in such a manner that each play, when he writes each play, he tend to cut off one character. And the last play that was written by Beckett was The Breath, where there is no characters as such. There is also a quite interesting remark that Beckett makes when premiering Waiting for Godot. He says to one of the critics asked him that, may I know who Godot is? And as a reply to that particular critic, Beckett comes up with a smart answer. If I would have known Godot, I would have stated it in my play. I don't know who Godot is. So it is for the audience to decide who Godot is while watching the play. So there is a kind of inner meaning to that particular play as such. Who Godot is it the government? Is it the institution? Is it the system? Is it the society that the trams are waiting for as such? So it's a very interesting play, and I would suggest that you read that play and understand it. Godot is also used for resembling God also. The word God is also prefixed in that particular word as such. Now the second dramatist, or the final dramatist that we have here, is Harold Pinter. we have Harold Pinter's work to study in detail. So, in Harold Pinter, he is considered to be the most dominant playwright of postmodern Britain. He's a British playwright. He's not a French playwright, he's a British playwright. And we cannot associate his plays completely in the theatre of the absurd. He's also associated with a particular genre called the comedy of menace also. Now, related to Harold Pinter as an absurd dramatist, his characters are fragmented and they try to create a kind of identity in his play. Right, we might have studied his Nobel laureate speech, Nobel Prize speech, Art, Truth and Politics, and in that Truth, Art and Politics, sorry, and in that he actually comes up with the creative element of building up characters inside his plays. He says that he doesn't have a all set idea with regard to characterization beforehand itself. It is only through automatic understanding or automatic psychological process that his characters are being created, and it is through the play that the characters try to reveal their kind of identity. He uses different techniques also in the absurd format. Some techniques are he uses blank stretches. There is a great scope for silence and deep concern for verification of truth inside his plays. Characters deliberately stop communicating in his play. And his plays are also titled on the type called comedy of menace, where black humor is mastered by Harold Pinter. So, comedy of menace is an extended form of Pinter's later work. His dialogues are often termed as Pinteresque dialogues. It is an adjective that is given to Harold Pinter's technique or style of writing.
So with that, we come to the end of this video. I hope all of you have understood the topic. In the next video, we'll be focusing on Harold Pinter's play, The Room. Till then, we both signing off. Have a good day and thank you.